I'm going to say hi and welcome to the Adversity Psychologist Podcast. I'm super excited today. Am I allowed to say I've got a secret idol on today? As a fellow psychologist that I've followed for a really long time, amazing career, I have Dr. Pam Spurr with me. Would you like to introduce yourself even better than I have and tell us a little bit about who you are and what's brought you on today?
Oh, well, that was a lovely introduction, Tara. But yes, I'm a psychologist who's worn many hats over the years. I've also worked a lot in coaching. And have done a lot of sort of corporate coaching, often as a sort of triage role. I presently do that a couple of days a week, where I triage employees who are struggling, whether they need, say, addiction services, or they need a clinical psychologist, or they just need a little bit of coaching. So I love that work. It's so rewarding talking to so many different people, within the corporation that I do this for. It's a large Anglo-American corporation in the city. And yeah, because that way you're kept on your toes with that sort of work. You never know what's going to come your way, who's going to be the next employee to talk to you. So I really love that work. But I also do a lot of other things. I've done a lot of writing for the media. I've written a number of self-help books over the years. And then, of course, I wrote my first children's story book that was published a couple months ago, which has been kind of an exciting change for me. I know, Tara, you've just written a book. It's always it's like your baby, even a children's storybook. It is like, delivering a baby. And it took so long to find a publisher because my agent went to knocking on about maybe 12 publishers' doors, and they all said, "Oh, we know Pam. Oh, she's great. She writes self-help for adults. So in the very difficult children's market, we don't know how we're going to place her." So it was really demoralizing.
Yeah.
But eventually he found a publisher who, funny enough, this publisher also does, they do a range. They do people who want to self-publish as well as doing like a known name like I have. Yeah. And so really lovely. They said, "No, we would love to give Pam a chance." And I was like, "Yay, if they want to buy my book, they can have it," because everyone else has turned me down. So yeah, it just goes to show you never know. It can be an easy chore to find someone to publish something, or it can be a really difficult time, which it took my agent about 2 years. So and
as you say, that's a good lesson in resilience as well, isn't it? That meant so much that you keep chipping away, because some people might have just backed off, and it can be disheartening, can't it, really, when you've got something you want to get out there. Should we start with that? Do you want to start with that book? Because I'm really intrigued as well, because it's a move across from what you're already known for as well. Kind of what made you want to do that?
Well, what happened, my first granddaughter was born 7.5 years ago. Her name is Layla. And I started, obviously we had the little baby books with just little pictures. And then I started writing a couple stories for her. And then when Eva was born 5 years ago, who this book is based on, I started writing stories for her. And then when my youngest granddaughter, Ella, was born 2.5 years ago, I kept writing. But the stories that my agent was pitching included a couple that I've written about Layla, and this one, Eva the Bear and the Magic Snowflake. And with this book, Eva, right from when she was 3 months old, we all started calling her the bear, because she just wasn't like a normal infant. And, my work at Guy's, when I was researching well-being and how to support parents who had under fives with emotional and behavioral issues, I came across a lot of babies. Let me tell you, in the 6 years I was at Guy's. So I knew there was something different about Eva, and it's very gung-ho. So she just throws herself in. And so when she was 3, she was trying to crawl, even though there was no way she was going to crawl. So this book kind of captures her gusto. And it's a story of a little bear who's very rambunctious. And against her parents' wishes, she goes off to the Blue Lake in a snowstorm. And she gets trapped in the snowstorm. And through finding her own courage and the help of the magic snowflake, she actually makes her way home. So it's kind of a story for 5 to 8-year-olds about finding your resilience, and you can do it, and that there is a little bit of magic in the world, because of course children love magic.
I do too.
I do too. So that's the story behind Eva the Bear and the Magic Snowflake.
And I love that it's resilience, but it's introducing kids to those concepts as well, which I love. So I'm going to have to read that. My children are a little bit older than 8, but I know that my 10-year-old would absolutely love that. And how does it feel to kind of branch out into something different? Because when we're kind of talking, sometimes you get into your comfort zone, you know what you're used to, and just talking about your publisher story there, trying to find people to take notice. How does that feel?
I think you using the words comfort zone are completely apt, because it was so out of my comfort zone. And I was really quite anxious about it when my agent started sending out a few of the stories. And I really felt, this could be horrible. I could get a story published, and people were just like, well, what are you doing writing children's books? You talk about adult things all the time. You've been in agony aunt for years, and you've dealt with all this kind of stuff. So I was really quite daunted, but I was determined. So if you're daunted, don't lose your determination.
That's what I really love about you. So we've talked, didn't we, just before we hit record, that I first got to know you via the original Big Brother. You've had such a varied career, haven't you? And to me, there's something there about resilience, that you just will throw yourself into something new. It's always stuff that's really valued, because I follow you on Twitter, and you really do stick to what you value. You're not easily kind of pushed or dissuaded, are you, by the pressures of social media and media? When you look back over your career now, what do you think? Because you've stepped outside your comfort zone a lot, haven't you, moving into different things?
Oh, I have. You're absolutely right. And I think it's because my parents raised all of us. I was the youngest of 5. Raised all of us to never doubt yourself.
Really?
Try things. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't matter. You've tried it. And that was the message all through our childhoods. And in that sense, they were, everybody thinks their parents are amazing, unless you've come from a dysfunctional family and you are estranged from your parents or whatever. But in that sense, they truly were. All of us were encouraged, whatever it was. I was very sporty, but I was also artistic. So they sent me, I was skiing. They sent me to ski school from age 6. They sent me to art classes. They let me, experience things. And I moved here on my own when I was 16 and lived for.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Moved from America. I had loved it when we lived in Cambridge for a year. My father was a professor, and he was on sabbatical. I absolutely loved England. We'd also lived here for a time when I was 4. And I graduated early from American high school, which you can do. You just take all your exams early, and moved over here to do a year foundation course in art, living with a very good family friend. And then at 17, I was allowed to move out into a bedsit. So my parents were quite, they were right behind me, but they were 6,000 miles away. And that was a time when we didn't have internet. We didn't have mobile phones. I had to go down to the local post office and book an international call to speak to them. So I'd have to go to the post office and say, in 2 days, can I have a call at 4 p.m. to America? Wow. So, you had to get on with things and just do it. So, I found my way at 17 and then ended up applying for psychology and started my BSc honors in psychology. So I left art because at the time I didn't have faith in my artistic ability.
Oh, interesting.
I'd also worked part-time in an art gallery in London. And actually the art world is seriously competitive.
Is it?
Yeah, I kind of thought, I always thought artists were so loving and caring, and it kind of put me off a bit. And psychology was my other major love. So I ended up doing my BSc honors in psychology, and in the middle of it, fell pregnant with my eldest. And although I'm totally pro-choice, for me, abortion, I didn't feel it was the right choice. So I was a very young mom and unmarried. We did eventually marry and had our second child, but it wasn't a very happy marriage. And the only good things that came out of it were my children. So that was kind of how my start in Britain went.
And so much kind of, again, the theme of this podcast, coping with adversity, but the resilience that has come across already from what you've been through, because, training to be a psychologist is hard work, let alone parenting. So I'm parent too. It's hard, right? It's hard balancing your work life and It's good old mum guilt, as I call it, which loves to just kind of sit on that shoulder, doesn't it, and chip away at you. Your art, which I love, you've come back to that, haven't you, recently as well?
Yeah, I came back to it just before the pandemic, funny enough. I started painting again in the autumn just for the pandemic, and was invited to do a show. It was March 2nd, 2020, just before, a couple weeks before lockdown. And then I did another show that was allowed during lockdown, where you couldn't, only a couple of people going at a time in the gallery. It was oh my goodness, it was so hard to get off the ground. And then I did another exhibition 2 summers ago, but that's also when I started to, I didn't realize at the time, lose my sight in my left eye. So it was a very difficult time when I was getting all these headaches. And I'm not a headachy person. I've never suffered from headaches.
Right.
And of course, I found out it was my right eye was taking up everything that my left eye had stopped doing.
Gosh.
And this all resulted from a tennis ball hitting my eye. Okay, it sounds ridiculous. I'm very sporty.
Random thing, right?
Well, I'm very sporty, apart from I'm not great at tennis. I've never played a lot of tennis, but I do like the occasional game. And I was playing with a girlfriend the summer before the pandemic. And at the end of it, we joked around and said, let's do our most hardest hits we can do for our last game, whatever. And she smacked the ball really hard, hit the court, and ricocheted straight into my left eye.
Gosh.
And she drove me to A&E. I mean, it was just so painful. A huge bruise was forming at A&E. They then got the ophthalmology, and it took a few hours, but I had, you can't just get it. There are ophthalmologists attached to A&E.
Yeah.
Still, they're really busy. And I was given the all clear. So they just said, you're going to have a massive bruise, which I did, big round bruise. My eye was red and bloodshot. But they gave me the all clear. Everything was fine. Well, what happened was, what they couldn't see at that point, the retina, the back of my eye, started forming scar tissue. And 2 years ago, that scar tissue started curling, and then a tear formed in my retina. I didn't know any of this was happening because I just started getting headaches. And then within 4 weeks of getting these headaches, I actually started to think there is something wrong with my sight. And I closed my right eye and I could see practically nothing.
Gosh.
I closed my left eye and I could see everything. And I immediately went first to the optometrist, who then said, refer me back to my GP, who had to refer me to Moorfields. And that's when it all started. And it has been daunting.
Yeah. Been through a lot, haven't you?
I've had 4 operations. I've only mentioned 3 on X. I didn't even mention the operation I had on February 17th. I just thought people are bored with hearing about my blind eye. I now have 25% sight back in it. So all those ops have been worth it. I still find the right eye gets strained, but it was the terrifying when they first told me, you're probably going to not regain. Maybe we might be able to help you regain maybe 10% of your sight.
Wow.
And it was affecting my little granddaughters. Their faces were blurred because my right eye started to get so tired.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was looking at them and just wanting to cry. I could not see their little faces clearly.
It's a lot to take in, right? Yeah.
I couldn't paint. When I was painting, I would just get a headache because my right eye was, because when I paint, I do loads of detail. And I'm there and I would do brush detail. I would take a feather and do little squiggles, and I would take a papaya and use the end of it to make funny little, I'll take sandpaper and sand off where it's dried and try and create, I'll use balloons.
Pretty intricate then, the work that you do. So, yeah.
You can imagine my right eye was just going, no way, we don't like this, it's not good.
And if it's right to say, it's one of those things that we just take for granted, that if we've been born with sight and we've, all our lives been blessed to be able to see and not have problems, to suddenly have that come on, but also that uncertainty, having to sit with not knowing. Yeah.
What terrifying. And I developed so much empathy for people with sight problems. I literally had, as you said, I never used to think about it. I had, my eyesight was good enough that although I had distance glasses for watching films, I didn't even need them for driving. So for me, this was like a massive wake-up call. I had never had empathy for people with sight challenges. Now I have the greatest empathy for them.
And did you get any support offered to you? Because obviously there's the medical input and the surgery that you've had, but just thinking psychologically, because sometimes as a psychologist, people presume that you know how to handle everything that life throws you, which is not the case. How did you cope psychologically with that? Did you have any support?
Well, no, I didn't. Certainly they don't offer any. You have to ask the NHS if you want anything. And I believe in my area, it's tremendously long waiting list. It really did. I experienced really sort of powerful cognitive dissonance. When I think about my personal constructs of things like courage and cowardice, I'd always, in my own sort of constructing of the world, I felt I was quite courageous. I felt I was a strong person, not a weak person, whatever a weak person is. I felt, I was very optimistic. I never felt for myself as a pessimist. Yes. And all of that was, I've faced challenges, many challenges in my life, but for some reason, this one set my whole personal constructs alight with dissonance. I was suddenly not feeling at all courageous, not all optimistic, and not at all strong. And if it wasn't for an amazing family, I've got a large family, and the support, then yes, I think I maybe would have needed to speak to someone about this awful dissonance that I had, just doubting myself, who I was. Yeah. All because of losing the sight in one eye.
It can spiral. Yeah, that kind of stuff can spiral as well. So how did you get it, like on a day-to-day basis? Is anyone listening now? Because what I really love for people to kind of take away is if that's you and you're suddenly facing, something really quite acute, so something that's come on very suddenly, that's really destabilizing in so many areas, because this affects your career, but your artwork, your ability to engage your grandkids. So it's quite what I would call global as a clinician, it's multiple areas. What helps you just get through each day, when your brain is fast forwarding to all this, what might be, and a lot of it very catastrophic as well?
I think, the most important thing was my family support and my friendships. So I'm very lucky to be blessed with a close circle of friends. And my family, we're a close family, we're a large family. We do a lot of, every family birthday, we're all, together, every, cousin, auntie, all of us, And so that is very fortunate. I think also my own training in challenging sort of these irrational thoughts that, oh my gosh, I'm not courageous. I feel like a coward in the face of this. I just want to curl up and cry, and all that kind of stuff. I just cannot believe this is happening. I just really had to challenge those. And I talked about it. And one of my very good friends is a psychologist. And she was a very powerful influence in getting me back to challenging what I thought about myself in terms of sight loss. And, when you have that kind of, personal support system, it's crucial.
Because it's interesting, I was going to ask that, having a friend that's a psychologist, because one of the things that I like to talk about quite a lot is how we have difficult conversations and how we support each other, so friends, family, or even, work colleagues, peers, when people are going through something difficult. Because I know historically, British people are really rubbish at holding tricky stuff. We're not great historically at talking about emotions. And sometimes if a friend is going through something difficult, sometimes people can pull away because they don't know what to say. Or the opposite, where they almost kind of jump into problem solving, where what you might want is something in between, which is just, can you just hear me and give me a space to just work this through? So I'm just interested to know, do you notice a difference between kind of your friend that's a psychologist who might be better able to do that versus other people?
Excellent point. Absolutely. She was that supporting, positive voice talking about these things with me. And other friends were like, you're going to be back to normal. You're just going to be fine. You're just going to be fine, But she still is said in a loving way. Is absolutely meaningful. That I truly believe my husband, who is an absolute rock. I'm so lucky. all my girlfriends who've known me all these years say, you had karma, you had a horrible first husband, an abusive, controlling first husband, and you lucked out with you met a wonderful man.
Yeah.
I'm so lucky. So he is just an absolute rock, and was literally there going, you are going to get through this. You have all this love from the family. Anything that happens, no matter if it's the worst case scenario and you do lose total sight in that eye permanently, you are still going to manage. And he was just like my kind of backup.
That kind of, and how nice to have that. And to be able to kind of accept that as well, because sometimes when people go through really adverse experiences, they can themselves pull away a little bit, the defenses might go up. And if you're a really independent, autonomous person, sometimes it can be hard to be vulnerable, can't it?
I think it is. And I'm kind of have two elements there. If we're talking about the construct of a sort of independent person and an independent person, I straddle that. In some ways, I'm incredibly independent. And in other ways, I really need and really value my immediate family and immediate friends. So for me, it was kind of like when I first got the news from Moorfields, what had happened with all the scans and everything, that I was going to need multiple. There was no way one operation was going to deal with it. I kind of sat on it with just my immediate family, my children, my husband, and my son-in-law and daughter-in-law. And then started the calls to friends, and the wider family. Yeah. So that was kind of the independent me, just wanting to sit on it, not wanting to just go, I've got to call everybody right now,
Yes, yeah. Which is sometimes when we're in threat mode, we don't have that kind of rational thoughts. It's harder to make decisions, isn't it? And we might do more impulsive stuff, like tell everybody, because it's more fear-driven, anxiety-driven behavior, isn't it?
Exactly. And there was a lot of fear. I think some people think, well, using the side of one eye, that couldn't be so bad. We'll just try using the one eye. And you will find your balance is affected. Yes. You get the headache like I did. That's classic when you're depending just on one eye. And when your balance and your the eye that is straining to do everything, you would be surprised the difference it makes to just day-to-day tasks. Even writing notes to my family, like I might leave a note for my husband or whatever,
Yeah.
And my body was all on one side of the paper. It was really weird. And then the ophthalmologist said to me, some people end up like that when they're only using one eye. They end up writing on that side of the paper,
And seemingly these are the things, again, that we just take for granted. So if you've always been able to do that all your life, and when you kind of think about your career and you've always been spinning lots of plates because there's lots of things that you do, it's not like somebody might just go to an office, for example, and that's their job and they might learn to compensate in that kind of environment. But if you're someone who's on telly 1 minute, writing the next minute, so much of that stuff, I imagine, just take for granted that you can do that. And that's tied up with your efficiency and what you take on board. But suddenly you have that destabilized.
No, my efficiency definitely went down. People would say, like the Mirror would ring me and say, can you do 800 words on, let's think what was going on 2 summers ago. I don't know, maybe Boris Johnson had just left the premiership or something. Can you do, and oh my goodness, it was much harder. I used to be able to knock out copy for newspapers really quickly. And I had to just start saying no, literally, because, if some big thing's happening, and 3 different outlets said, oh, can you write some copy or something? I just couldn't do it. So efficient.
Kind of how that was as well. If you're used to being able to say yes and coming back again to that kind of autonomy, that independence, how it is to have to say no when it might not be your, 100% your decision. It's driven by something else or a need. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I would like to have done it, but there's just no way. My efficiency, and thank you for reminding me, because I'd kind of forgotten about the efficiency part of it, because I'm now 2 years into it, 4 operations later with kind of 15-20% back maybe is what I was at Moorfields last week. I think now I'm used to it and things are coming back, things like efficiency, fewer headaches. I know about resting my life and all that stuff.
they're putting your own boundaries on. Then if you're someone again who's used to a fast pace, and again, I think I sometimes work with people where we're doing kind of more of a rehabilitation type model, and there can be this kind of, I've got to get back to where I was. But I imagine, have you had to revise that a little bit in order to be able to rest? And yeah.
No, absolutely. You're so right about that. Originally, as I said, they said you may not get any sight back.
Gosh,
or we're going to aim for maybe 25%, we hope, with the different operations.
Yeah.
And right now I'm sitting at probably 15, maybe 20% from the report last week.
Yeah.
Of what I was only 2 years ago. So, it's taken this 4 operations to get back to there. So,
and that kind of, the role, I'm a big advocate of compassion focused therapeutic work, that kind of, and sometimes we're not so great at this kind of self-compassion. If it was a friend going through that, we're often much better at being compassionate to them, but sometimes we can give ourselves a bit more of a rough ride. And I'm just thinking, as you kind of look forward now, because you've written this wonderful new children's book, you've stepped outside your comfort zone, you had to kind of deal with all the uncertainty of whether someone was able to publish it. How do you feel about the future? Is that all right to ask? Is there still some uncertainty about your eye and what the future looks like?
I think I've gone from what felt catastrophic 2 years ago, when there was all the unknown, to now, I've gone through all the different stages. They often liken these things almost to like if you've had a breakup or a bereavement or something, where you go through
like kind of grief. I wondered that. Yeah.
And I've now come to acceptance. Yeah. It's taken a long time, but I'm now not shocked when they told me last week, well, you've got you're holding at 15, 20%. There may be a further operation needed down the line because of another complication that's developed.
Okay.
Postoperative uveitis, which most people won't know what that is, but it's an inflammation of the iris.
Right. Okay.
So that's developed. So they're treating that right now, but that can lead to an operation itself. So, yeah, but I really have reached the stage of acceptance. I know I got tearful earlier, and that might sort of signal that maybe I haven't, but
I think that's important for people to see, don't you? That I kind of think when people are hearing this, either if you're on the train, listen to the audio version, or you're watching the video version, that I think that's a really important message, that life isn't this kind of trajectory and we get through stages and then we don't cry and we've accepted it and we've moved on. Is that we might have little peaks and troughs within that. And I think it's really good for people to show that there is vulnerability there. And do you know what I also think is really lovely, if it's okay to say, I think it's really good when therapists and psychologists can also show that they are vulnerable, because sometimes there can be this misconception that we have it all together. And I think it brings us closer to the people that we work with when we can show that.
I don't know any psychologist who hasn't had all sorts of issues.
Me neither.
It informs your work,
Yeah.
If we led some sort of gilded, blessed life where there weren't challenges, how could we even have empathy for people,
Absolutely.
Who that we're, supporting and working with? So
absolutely. Yeah. But what I really love is those stages that helping people know, life isn't something where we kind of have these tick boxes. And I think, when people understand a little bit more about kind of the threat brain, there can be this kind of rush or expectation. I've got to get through this. I need to get to the point where, I know what's happening. And sometimes you have to sit with that uncertainty, don't you? And sometimes you do have to sit with the uncomfy for it to become more comfy. I do a lot of acceptance and commitment therapy, which is about making room for stuff rather than kind of battling and pushing it away. But it can be hard because we're in a quick fix society, aren't we? Where we want anxiety to go, we want grief to go, we want to get back on, or we try and bury it a little bit. But I think what's really lovely is that people can take away from today that it's okay to be vulnerable, that sitting with uncertainty is hard, but you can do it. And you can have a meaningful, value-laden life while you're going through all of that.
And I totally agree with what you've just said. I mean, as it's certainly my agony aunt and coaching work, yes. I've come across so many people who say they've just discovered an affair, or they know that they might lose their job because there's job cuts going on. Just any sort of crisis, all sorts of crises people feel. And the first thing I've always said is, just don't make a rash decision now when this has just hit you. And you have to kind of, as I said earlier, I kind of sat with it when I first discovered what was going on 2 years ago. And then, with the support of my immediate family, decided, I'm going to now talk to a few friends about it. There was, you can't, the most important thing is just not to run one way or another or whatever challenge you're facing. And you're right about the quick fix. People want quick fixes. We're used to everything instant, on tap, 24/7 online, 24/7 delivery of our takeout food, whatever. And that's just not how humans actually work with challenges and crises.
And when we look at the impact of like stress on the body, for example, as well, I'm really into the kind of mind-body link, is that sometimes when we're putting too many expectations and we're getting really stressed that we're not getting better or things aren't progressing or we don't have this magical quick fix, actually that can be counterproductive as well, can't it? And it can make us feel worse. It can have an impact on our physical health. So I really hope people can take away from today this idea that, that the best thing you can do is lean into the uncomfy and try and make it feel a little bit more comfy in order to maybe make some better decisions as well. As you say, not those impulse-driven ones.
I've always said it's important to embrace whether you have fear, anger, you need to embrace it and kind of roll with it before you start taking steps to address it and change the situation or whatever. I think, again, if you embrace these difficult, powerful emotions, you are less likely to go into denial about them. And shove them under the carpet.
Absolutely. And we're all guilty of that at times, aren't we? Of kind of, let's just push it away and it'll be fine. I always liken it to the metaphor of the bin. No one wants to empty the bin in the house, so then we'll keep pushing more and more in until eventually someone's got to pull that bin bag out, right? And sometimes it splits because we push so much stuff in there. So we are, at some points we do need to start going, hang on a minute, what's going on here? It kind of brings us full circle back to Eva the bear, doesn't it? So, how can we get children to start understanding about resilience? How can we get children to start understanding about adversity? So your book's like the perfect starting point, isn't it? Of helping to learn what we've got in us to cope.
I know, and I think you can never start too young. And sometimes I think parents are almost frightened to let their children maybe look at a challenge and say their own little solution or something. Parents want to take over and do everything for them, rather than kind of encouraging them to see what maybe
that's such a good point. Yes.
And
that was the brainchild behind this podcast, that actually, as a kind of psychologist myself, my job is to come and kind of help people look at their problems maybe in a different way, have a look at techniques that might work better. But the thing that I was really struck by is that people come with resilience and they already come with things they've got through. Look how we all got through the pandemic. If you'd asked people in that March, how do you think you're going to cope? Much different answers to asking them now about what they're really surprised. So we have all this stuff in us. And I love your point. And I was hoping that anyone listening who has kids or grandkids, nephews, nieces, whatever, we do, and I'm guilty of this, we do overprotect our kids and maybe problem solve for them a bit too much. And I actually think it is really lovely to start talking about how we help them to maybe know that sometimes they've got to sit with some adversity and learn how to problem solve. And they've got tools to do it.
Yes.
So if people want to find Eva the bear, where do they get hold of it? Because that's the important thing. So people, we're talking about this book, but where is it? How is it available in all kind of major bookshops? Where's the best place for people to find it?
Certainly the easiest is Amazon, but also it was in a number of different bookstores, some sort of smaller ones, some of the Waterstones around the country. Austin Macaulay, my publisher, their website has it. I always say Amazon though, because if you already use Amazon, then your address is already there.
Well, I'll make sure that it's in the show notes, because you've written so many books as well. We will put all. Are there any that you want to talk about, any more recent ones? Because I'll make sure that they're all in the show notes. And the show notes for this podcast are live, because I know if I'm listening to a podcast, I won't probably go and Google stuff. But if the link is there, you're more likely to go click on it. So we'll make sure that all of that stuff is in the show notes.
Sadly, the books that I'm most proud of was The Emotional Eater's Diet, tackling emotional eating, from 2014. I think it's now out of print though. Sadly, it was a small publisher, and I think it's out of print. But I researched all of the major studies on emotional eating for that book.
Wow.
I had over 50 references cited in that book. And I started writing it because so many of the coaching clients I had would then say, oh gosh, if only I could lose weight before my wedding, that kind of thing. I've been comfort eating, blah, 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 and it was all about, and I had so many clients just would randomly, even if they just came for a little confidence coaching, things like that, would randomly throw in, oh my gosh, I've been comfort eating. And so all those people telling me this, I started thinking, I really do want to write this book. And sadly, it's the book I'm probably most proud of. And
well, I was going to say, actually, maybe there's another whole episode there, because I haven't covered that, but it's one of the things I am seeing so much of in my clinic at the moment. Kind of over a 25 career, I get little kind of peaks and troughs and things. But post-pandemic, that is the thing people are talking about, which is just so, maybe that's meant to be. Maybe we need to do an episode if you're happy to come back one day on emotion, because I haven't covered that yet. And it's something that comes up even with people who don't get kind of referred to that. It tends to come up so often in the work that I do. So it's so interesting that you said that. If people want to find out, most people know where you are, but if you don't know where Pam is, where do you hang out? Where can we find you on socials and websites?
I use X, formerly known as Twitter. That is my big thing. I do have an Instagram account that I haven't posted, I think, for 6 months. I literally hate Instagram. I'm dyslexic. The layout just freaks me out. It scrambles my brain.
Yeah.
So
it's about finding your fit, isn't it, with social media? Some platforms just suit.
It flows with my dyslexia. I totally, 99% of the time, it works very well. So that's where I am at Dr. Pam Spurr, or on my website, drpam.co.uk.
And I'll make sure this is all on our show notes. So I like to ask my guests, I'm showing my age now, but my signature move, if there was one adversity takeaway, I know you're giving us loads, if there's one little nugget that you could leave us with, what would it be?
Don't get into future dependent happiness. So many people I talk to say, well, I'm going to be happy when my partner finally changes. I'm going to be happy when I get that promotion. I'm going to be happy once I get out of this mess. And I always say, if your happiness depends on the future and we cannot control the future, you need to start challenging that and look at even if you're in a mess today or you've just lost your job, you've got to look at today, the small joys, the small blessings, the little things that made you happy, because future dependent happiness is taking you down the wrong road.
So that's
the kind of thing you meant.
Absolutely. That's not just a nugget, that's like a diamond, isn't it? Because I think so many of us at the moment, that trap of it'll all be okay when we're all guilty of that, aren't we? And it's a bit of a vortex as well, isn't it? Pam, it's been amazing having you on. Thank you so much. We realise it's leopard print Friday, right? This is just totally random matching. Never have enough of a leopard print. That's a little happiness. That's a micro moment of happiness. Leopard print on a Friday. It's been amazing having you on. Thank you. I know you're so busy, so I really do appreciate your time, and that I get to do a little fist bump because I've met my idol, so I'm going to own that. That's my micro moment of happiness today.
Thank you. You have totally embarrassed me, but thank you very much.
We're lean into that, feel all the feels. Thank you so much, Pam. It's lovely to meet you.
Well, that was wonderful. Keep me posted when you put it out.